My mother looked me in the eyes and said, "Those ashes around your neck? They're not your sister's." That's the night I realized grief wasn't my biggest heartbreak, betrayal was. You know, sometimes grief hits in ways that don't even make sense. You think you've gone through the worst of it. And then, years later, something happens that just tears the wound wide open again. My parents divorced when I was young. It wasn't the clean kind of breakup either. They tried to make things work afterward, but then Mom remarried. And just when life started to find some rhythm again, she had what she used to call her oops baby. That was my little sister. She was everything good in this messy world, the laughter, the innocence, the kind of kid who could make you forget how heavy things were. And then one day, she was gone. An accident. 14 years old. People say the first year after a loss is the hardest. But no one ever talks about when there isn't a first to look forward to anymore. No first prom, no graduation, no new birthdays. Just an endless stretch of what could have been. It's been 4 years since she died, and somehow it still feels raw. A few nights ago, Mom came over. We were drinking together, talking about my sister like we sometimes do when it's late and the silence feels too big. I wear this little necklace that has some of my sister's ashes inside. Or at least, I thought it did. And that's when everything fell apart. Mom slipped up, just casually, between sips of wine. She said something like, "You know, those ashes you carry, they're just regular ashes. Like burnt wood." I froze. She tried to laugh it off, said it didn't matter, said what's important is the sentiment. That it wasn't about the physical ashes, but what they represented. But all I could hear was, "You've been lying to me. For 4 years. Turns out, she'd already poured my sister's ashes without me or my brother into a plot she bought with my stepdad. She never told us. She just decided. I don't even remember standing up, I just remember yelling. I screamed at her to get out of my house. She looked so confused, like she couldn't understand why I was angry, like she really thought that because she felt emotional about it, it somehow made up for what she'd done. She kept saying, "It's just a misunderstanding." And I kept calling her a liar. I remember her face, red from crying, when my stepdad came to pick her up. I remember locking the door behind her. I remember throwing the necklace out into the yard and then regretting it instantly. When she tried to pick it up, I ripped it out of her hands. I could hear myself screaming. It didn't even sound like me. Afterward, I sat on the floor shaking, staring at that stupid little necklace, realizing that the one thing I thought connected me to my sister wasn't even real. My stepdad called the next day, said he wanted to talk. Said he understood why I was angry but that I also needed to remember your mom is grieving too. He told me to be kind. I couldn't stop replaying my mom's face in my head, the shock, the tears, the betrayal I felt burning through me. She lied for 4 years, 4 years of me believing I was carrying my sister close to my heart. And it was all just ashes from a fireplace. I couldn't stop asking myself, how long would she have let me believe this? How long would the lie have gone on if she hadn't gotten drunk and slipped? It broke something in me, and then came the fallout. I told Mom she had one chance to make it right, to tell my brother and my dad the truth herself. She refused. Said, "You just want to hurt me. You're going to ruin everything." So I told them. I sat my brother and dad down, explained everything, that the ashes in our necklaces weren't real. My dad. I've never seen him break like that. He just sat there, silent, like someone had punched the air out of him. My brother yelled at me first, furious that I hadn't told him sooner, and then he started crying, too. We all did. It was chaos, grief crashing into anger, anger crashing into disbelief. And when it finally quieted down, my dad said something that stuck with me. He said, "We can still honor her. The necklace means what you let it mean." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But it wasn't that simple. I wasn't angry because the ashes were fake. I was angry because the truth was fake. 4 years of holding something over my heart thinking it was her. 4 years of talking to her, crying into that necklace, wearing it like a piece of her soul was with me. And it was all a lie. Dad tried to make sense of it. He said maybe Mom thought she was doing the right thing. He even offered to find the plot so we could visit together. But Mom wouldn't answer his calls. Her social media went dark. She just vanished. And I was left there, spiraling. Every little thing started to make sense, moments I'd brushed off before. The way she never panicked when she forgot her necklace on trips. The way she volunteered to handle separating the ashes. The way she always brushed off questions about where exactly the rest of them were. It hit me like a freight train. She'd been living with this lie for years, knowing we'd been carrying pieces of nothing. I tried to keep it together at work, but some days I'd just break down out of nowhere. I'd rush to the bathroom, hands shaking, pretending I had a cold. I started smoking again. I'd quit after my sister's death. But this cracked something open in me that I thought had healed. Dad started calling every day. My brother came over constantly, making sure I ate something. They were trying to be strong for me, even though they were just as broken. I felt like a burden. It's weird how grief morphs over time. How it doesn't get smaller, you just grow around it. But this wasn't just grief. It was betrayal layered on top of grief. I started looking into grief counseling again. My old therapist had retired, and finding someone new was harder than I thought. Insurance issues, waiting lists, the usual nightmare. But more than that, I was scared. Scared to unpack this. Scared that if I started, I'd never stop. Sometimes, when it got too hard to breathe, I'd remind myself, maybe my sister wouldn't have minded. Maybe she would have laughed at the idea of becoming part of the earth woven into grass and flowers. Part of something beautiful and living. That thought kept me from falling apart completely. I just wish Mom had let us choose how to say goodbye. It's strange how life keeps moving, even when you feel like you're stuck in the same spot. Days turn into weeks, and the world doesn't pause to let you catch your breath. You still have to show up to work, answer emails, pay bills as if your heart isn't burning a hole in your chest. That first month after everything came out, it was chaos. I barely slept. I went through the motions like a ghost, mechanically doing things just to avoid thinking. The only real moment of clarity I had came when I checked my voicemail, my stepdad's voice again, calm and rehearsed. "Your mom's a wreck. She's heartbroken. You need to talk to her." I didn't respond. I couldn't, because how do you talk to someone who built an entire fantasy and forced you to live in it? But life didn't stop, not even for me. I got a promotion at work. Something I'd been working toward for months. My boss said they'd planned to tell me earlier, but held off to give me space after everything that happened. It should have been good news. But when I opened the email confirming it, I just stared at it. Numb. I couldn't even feel proud. The old me, the version before all this, would have celebrated. Now it just felt hollow. I threw myself into work harder than ever. 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Most days. It wasn't healthy, I knew that, but work kept my mind busy. It was the only place I didn't have to think about ashes or graves or lies. Just numbers, emails, and tasks. Predictable things. Dad kept warning me I was working too much. My brother said the same, but the truth is, work made me feel safe, like I was in control of at least one thing in my life. And then, there was the drinking. It started small. A glass of wine before bed to calm down. Then 2. Then I stopped counting. One night, I blacked out completely. Woke up on the couch, no memory of how I'd gotten there, my phone full of missed calls from Dad. That scared me enough to stop. He came over, took all the alcohol from the house, and sat with me until morning. I've never felt so ashamed or so small. That's when I realized how close I was to repeating my mother's mistakes, numbing pain, instead of facing it. But I wasn't her, I couldn't be. And then, she finally called my brother. He told me later what happened. She cried. She apologized. She tried to spin the same story, that she acted on impulse, that she didn't want to destroy us more by having to deal with the ashes. Those were her words. Destroy. I don't know what made me angrier, the fact that she lied again, or the fact that she kept justifying it as if it were some kind of kindness. Like scattering my sister's ashes without telling us was noble. My brother tried to stay calm. He pressed her, asking why she volunteered to be the one to separate the ashes in the first place. And she said, "I thought I could handle it. But when I saw them, I couldn't do it." He told me he didn't believe her either, because if it was really impulsive, why keep lying for 4 years? Why double down every time we brought it up? Why pretend to care about our necklaces? It wasn't impulsive, it was control. And once again, we were the ones left to clean up the emotional wreckage. After that conversation, she stopped answering both of us. Not just me anymore. She shut everyone out. Dad too. The silence was worse than the lies. I needed something to ground me again. Something real. So I called the funeral home. I didn't even know what I was asking for at first. I just needed proof. Something. They told me they still had my sister's fingerprints on record. I cried right there on the phone, ugly, shaking sobs that wouldn't stop. The woman on the other end spoke softly. Said she'd make sure to send them. That became my next mission. To take that fingerprint and turn it into something lasting. I told Dad and my brother I wanted to get it tattooed, maybe a small print on my wrist, where I used to hold her hand. Dad said he might do the same. Or at least have a necklace made with the print engraved, something that couldn't be faked this time. Meanwhile, I tried contacting the cemetery to confirm where Mom had scattered the ashes. Emails, calls, messages, nothing. No one got back to me. It was like chasing smoke. At this point, my stepdad stepped in, not to help, but to set rules. He called and said he wouldn't talk to us unless we agreed to stop blaming your mother. He said he'd hang up anytime the conversation got emotional. When we pressed him for answers like the exact location of the plot, he threatened to call the cops. It was insane. I couldn't believe he was protecting her more than he was protecting her kids. I tried therapy again. Found someone online who seemed kind, offered virtual sessions. She was fine, gentle, patient, but something didn't click. It felt like she was listening, but not really hearing me, like she was checking boxes instead of holding space. So I stopped going after a few sessions. Dad didn't like that. But honestly, I didn't have the energy to start over again. I was barely keeping my head above water. My brother, he wasn't handling it well either. The anger never really left him. He'd go quiet one moment and start shouting the next about how unfair it all was. How mom could do this to us. To her own children. I think he wanted to believe there was still some version of her that loved us the way a mother should. But that version didn't exist anymore. Maybe it never did. We tried reaching the cemetery again, both of us. Still nothing. When we finally got through to someone, they said the place was full, no new burials, no plots available, no information to share. That hit harder than I expected. Because if they weren't even supposed to scatter ashes there, what did that mean? Was mom lying about that too? That thought kept me awake for nights. I'd stare at the ceiling, wondering if the ashes had even been scattered at all, or if they were somewhere else entirely. Maybe even thrown away. And the worst part? I couldn't prove anything. That was when she made her next move. Out of nowhere, mom reached out. She told me she was willing to sell me the plot. Her tone was so casual, like she was offering me a used car. She said, "You and your brother can buy it from me. That way, we can all be together. You, me, your stepdad, your sister." I remember just sitting there, staring at my phone, rereading her message over and over. The price? $99,500. She said they'd forego the cost of the headstone to make it easier on us. As if that was some kind of kindness. No apology, no explanation. Just a price tag on grief. She actually said, "It's a chance for peace." I wanted to laugh and scream at the same time. Peace? She thought she could sell me peace. My stepdad backed her up, of course. Said it was her way of reconciling, that I should meet her halfway. And a ready magic south that. But how do you meet halfway with someone who buried your sister without you and lied about it for years? I told my brother. He lost it. Said we'd make our own memorial. Said even if we bought it, she'd still show up. Still try to control it. He's right. But part of me still looked at my bank account and thought, what if this is the only way? I hated myself for even considering it. Dad started looking into legal options if we could force her to share the location or prove ownership. But it's complicated. Cemeteries don't like drama, and honestly, no amount of paperwork could fix the real damage anyway. I stopped sleeping again. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face smiling, drunk, telling me those ashes were just burnt wood. The only thing that helped was work. Just drowning myself in it. But even that started slipping. I'd type an email and suddenly find tears dripping on the keyboard. The grief wasn't fading, it was evolving, twisting into something colder. And I realized, somewhere deep down, I didn't just lose my sister that night. I lost my mother too. You ever reach a point where you're so tired that even your sadness starts to feel muted? Like your heart is screaming, but your body's already given up? That's where I was. Weeks bled into months. My mother and stepfather went quiet again, radio silence, until one day, I got an email from her. Just a few lines. "You're still my child. I love you. I hope you'll reconsider the plot. You can still make peace before it's too late." I stared at the words until they blurred. There it was again, her version of love, wrapped up in manipulation. A mother trying to sell peace like it came with a receipt. She even gave me a deadline, a date by which I had to decide. It felt surreal, like she was turning my grief into a business transaction. $99,500 to make the pain go away. Dad told me to ignore her. My brother told me to block her number. I didn't. At least not right away. Because some small, pathetic part of me still wanted her to say something real. To admit what she did. To mean it this time. But the deadline kept looming like the sword of Damocles hanging over my head. I'd wake up in the middle of the night thinking about it. I'd go to work, stare at spreadsheets, and all I could think about was that number. $99,500. Like my sister's peace, my peace had a price tag. So, one Saturday, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the park. No music, no phone, just air. It was one of those muggy, gray days where everything feels heavy. The kind my sister would have complained about, saying, "Can't we just go to a restaurant instead?" I sat there for a long time, watching kids play, couples argue, dogs chase balls, and for the first time, I realized something. I hadn't lost everything. I lost my sister. I lost my mother. But I still had my dad, my brother, my job. The things that tethered me to the world. So I decided to stop, waiting for my mom's apology. I decided not to buy the plot. When the deadline passed, I expected silence. But instead, she started calling again at all hours. Sometimes she'd leave voicemails. Sometimes she'd just hang up. Then came the Facebook posts, her trying to play the victim. Isolation causes mental illness in the elderly. Children today have no respect for family. I saw them. I didn't respond, but each post felt like a small knife, twisting deeper. Then, one night, she called while I was at work. I picked up without checking the caller ID, stupid reflex. The moment I said hello, she snapped. "Stop being cruel to me." I hung up. Blocked her number. Blocked my stepdad too. A few days later, my neighbor told me my stepdad had been standing outside my house with a box for about 10 minutes, before leaving it by the door. When I opened it, I froze. It was full of things I'd made for her as a kid. Drawings, crafts, little cards that said, "I love you, Mom. There is no present. There is no promise of this. If you have tended it sentible, it should have made me sad." But it didn't. It made me furious, like she was trying to use nostalgia to guilt me back into submission. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I burned it all, every drawing, every letter. And for the first time in a long while, I could breathe. It was like exhaling poison I'd been holding inside for years. Dad said he'd keep handling communication with her, so I didn't have to. My brother agreed. They both cut contact too. He even commented once on one of her posts, something sharp but restrained. Funny how family only matters after you destroy it. After that, she stopped. No more calls. No more posts. No more boxes. The silence felt heavy at first, then peaceful. I tried therapy again. This time, with someone who specialized in grief and trauma. It wasn't easy. Every session felt like reopening a wound. But slowly, I started seeing patterns, how I'd been chasing validation from someone who was never going to give it. My therapist said something that stuck with me. "You're not just grieving your sister. You're grieving the mother you thought you had." That hit me hard. Because she was right. All those years, I'd been waiting for my mom to be someone she never was. Compassionate, honest, loving. But she wasn't. She was selfish, impulsive, and addicted to control. And maybe she always had been. It's strange once I started to see that clearly. The guilt started to fade. I stopped checking her socials. Stopped wondering what she was doing. Instead, I started doing something new. I opened a small savings account, $2,000. Not for bills or emergencies, for healing. Every time I spent money on something, kind of meal for dad, flowers for my sister, a gift for my brother, I used that account. It was my way of reclaiming what had been taken from me. A few weeks later, my brother and I planned a trip with dad to the campground my sister loved. The one where we'd spent our last family trip together. We brought flowers, we laughed a little, we cried a lot. It didn't fix everything. But for the first time, it didn't feel like pretending. It felt like real healing, messy and uneven. But real. I still worked too much. 75 hours a week. It kept me sane, but in the small hours after work, I started doing something else. Remembering her the right way. She used to save her allowance to buy gifts for everyone. Mom, dad, friends, even her teachers. She was the kind of kid who gave more than she had. I'd scold her for it back then. Now I get it. She wasn't wasteful, she just believed love was meant to be shared. And I realized that's what I wanted to do too, to stop clinging to ashes and start living in a way that honored her kindness. So I stopped thinking about the plot. Stopped trying to fix something that was never mine to fix. And for the first time since she died, I felt a little bit free. It had been months since I last heard her voice. The silence was something I'd come to treasure, a fragile, trembling peace I was afraid to disturb. But, of course, peace never lasts long when it comes to my mother. It happened out of nowhere. One afternoon in September, there was a knock at my door. I didn't expect anyone. My dad usually called before dropping by. My brother texted. My neighbors always waved from the fence, but when I looked through the peephole, my heart froze. It was her. I should have ignored it. I should have locked the door, walked away, but I didn't. Something in me, that same old wound, that still hoped for a version of her that didn't exist, turned the knob. She stood there with a box of cookies, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and a single rehearsed line. "I'm sorry. I hurt you with the ashes." It was the first thing she said. And for one fleeting second, I thought she meant it. I thought maybe, just maybe, this was her finally taking accountability. But the moment I told her, "I don't want to talk about my sister right now," she ignored me. She started crying loud, dramatic sobs, and said things like, "You have to understand. I only wanted to make things right. I was in so much pain. You don't know what it's like to lose a child." She turned her grief into a performance. And the more she cried, the more I felt myself shrinking the way I always did around her. Then she said it. "Life is finite, but a mother's love for her children is infinite." It sounded rehearsed. Like she'd practiced it in front of a mirror. She talked about trying to fix things, about finding a compromise, about making amends. But not once did she actually explain why she did what she did. She wanted forgiveness without truth, reconciliation without honesty. I didn't give it to her. I just sat there, nodding, letting her talk. And when she finally stopped, I said, quietly, I hear you. I didn't say, I forgive you. I didn't say, it's okay. I didn't say, I understand. Because I didn't. Because I couldn't. We spent the next hour in this weird, empty conversation, her talking about her work, her garden, some book she was reading, as if we hadn't spent the last year tearing each other apart. Before she left, she asked if she could come over again sometime. I told her I'd call her when I was ready. That was a lie. When she hugged me goodbye, I froze. And afterward, I couldn't stop thinking about that hug. It felt wrong, heavy, suffocating. I knew what it was. She was trying to pull me back in. My therapist later called it hoovering. The kind of manipulation where someone tries to suck you back into their orbit by pretending to be remorseful. At the time though, I just felt stupid, because a part of me still wanted to believe she meant it. But then she started showing up again. Uninvited, calling from new numbers, leaving voicemails like, you're making a mistake. You'll regret pushing me away. Your sister would hate what you're doing to this family. It was always the same. Guilt, control, fear. One night, she told me, you've ruined everyone's healing process. You've turned us against each other. And something inside me finally snapped. I told her she was a monster. That she'd been ruining our lives long before my sister died. That she was addicted to chaos, that she broke things just to watch people clean up after her. I don't even remember half the words that came out of my mouth. I just remember the rage white hot and shaking. She slammed my door so hard it caught my hand. Then she shouted, maybe I should just pour the ashes down the drain, and I lost it. I followed her to her car, screaming. Words I'd never said to anyone came pouring out of me. Years of pain, years of guilt, years of wanting her to be someone she wasn't. All of it exploded right there in the driveway. She drove off, tires screeching, and I just stood there, shaking, my hand throbbing where the door had hit it, my heart pounding so loud I couldn't hear anything else. That night, I couldn't breathe. My chest was tight, my vision blurry. I thought I was having a panic attack. I sat on the floor, clutching my shirt, whispering to myself, it's over. It's over. It's over. Except it wasn't. The next few weeks were a blur. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I'd wake up with my heart racing so fast it hurt. But I didn't go to the doctor. I didn't want to know. When my therapist asked about it, I shrugged it off. Told her I was just stressed. She looked at me for a long time before saying, that sounds like passive suicidal ideation. She said it gently, but it hit me like a punch to the gut. She didn't mean I wanted to die, just that I was living like I didn't care if I did. And she was right. I'd stopped taking care of myself, stopped eating properly, stopped sleeping, stopped feeling like my life was worth protecting. That scared me. So I agreed to go for a checkup. But before I could even make the appointment, my body decided for me. One morning, while making coffee, everything went white. My hands went numb, my knees buckled, and I woke up on the kitchen floor with my neighbor kneeling over me, shouting my name. Turns out, I had what they called stress-induced cardiomyopathy, broken heart syndrome. It's exactly what it sounds like. I'd literally worked and worried myself into heart failure. It sounds dramatic, and it is, but thankfully, it wasn't fatal. Some medication, lifestyle changes, and time off work were enough. Still, it terrified me. I remember lying in that hospital bed, IV in my arm, thinking, she's not going to kill me twice. Not again. So when I got home, I made changes. I cut my hours. I quit smoking. I started cooking again, baking like I used to when things felt okay. Dad still called every day. But now we just talk, not about grief, not about mom, just about life. Movies. Food. Work. Anything. My brother and his fiancée visited more often too. They'd just happened to be in the area. But I knew it was on purpose. And honestly, I didn't mind. It felt nice to have noise in the house again. Laughter. Company. Even my neighbor, the one who called 911, started checking in. She never made a big deal about it. She'd just drop by with tea or a jar of homemade soup, acting like nothing weird had ever happened. I didn't know how to thank her. So one day, I baked her brownies, then cookies, then bread. It became a thing, and soon, I was baking for the whole neighborhood. Maybe it sounds silly, but it helped. Helping people, feeding them, listening to them, it made me feel human again. Like I was building something good out of the wreckage. I met the family across the street, a dad taking care of his sick wife and 2 kids. I started dropping off meals for them too. At first, it was awkward. I didn't want to intrude, but they welcomed it. The kids were sweet, loud, honest, funny. The older one loved telling me exactly how to arrange blankets and pillows when he played house. The younger one would wave at me every time I stepped outside. Their laughter filled the quiet spaces in my house. For the first time, my world started expanding again. Beyond loss. Beyond guilt. Beyond her. It's funny how life slowly weaves you back into the world without you realizing it. One moment you're sure you'll never laugh again. And the next, you're sitting in your kitchen, surrounded by half-burnt cookies and giggling at your own mess. I didn't plan to become the neighbor who bakes, but it just happened. Every week, I'd find an excuse to make something: banana bread, cupcakes, brownies, and quietly drop them at someone's door. I told myself it was a thank you for their kindness after the ambulance incident. But deep down, it was something else. It was a way of proving to myself that I could still give. Dad used to joke that I was trying to fatten up the whole neighborhood. My brother would tease me, saying, "You're basically turning grief into sugar." Maybe he was right. But it worked. It kept me moving. It kept me connected. And people noticed. Not in a big life-changing way, just small gestures. A wave. A thank you note. Kids yelling hi from across the street. After months of feeling invisible, it mattered. The family I'd been helping across the street started inviting me inside more often. The dad, exhausted, gentle, always trying to hold everything together, would finally sit down for a few minutes while I helped his kids with dinner or homework. We'd talk about everything and nothing. About how hard it was to be both a caregiver and a parent. About how sometimes just washing the dishes felt like an accomplishment. His wife, despite being sick, had this quiet warmth that filled the room. She'd sit in her chair, smiling at us, saying, "You have a kind soul." I didn't know how to respond to that. I hadn't been called kind in a long time. One night, after helping clean up their kitchen, I walked home and realized something strange. I hadn't thought about my mother once that entire evening. Not once. It hit me like sunlight breaking through clouds. Maybe healing wasn't about forgetting. Maybe it was about building enough life around the pain that it didn't take up all the space anymore. Halloween came faster than I expected. The kids insisted I decorate, so I did: cobwebs, pumpkins, even a cheap plastic skeleton hanging by the door. It felt silly, but it also felt good. When trick-or-treating started, I put out a bowl of candy and sat by the window, expecting maybe 3 or 4 kids. Instead, my porch turned into a parade. Pirates, princesses, superheroes, and almost every one of them waved and said, "You're the cookie lady." I laughed so hard I cried. For the first time in years, the sound of laughter in my house didn't echo against grief. It filled it. When I ran out of candy, the kids from across the street brought me some of theirs. "You can't run out," they said, dumping chocolate bars into my bowl. It wasn't about candy. It was about belonging. After Halloween, I started thinking about the holidays, which used to be my sister's favorite time of year. She'd plan everything. Decorations, music, even the color of wrapping paper. Christmas, to her, wasn't just a holiday. It was an event. So I planned ahead. My therapist and I made a holiday plan: strategies for staying grounded, avoiding triggers, and keeping my boundaries with mom firm. Dad and my brother were doing the same. We'd decided who'd host, who'd cook, who'd distract whom if emotions got too heavy. It sounds clinical, but honestly, it helped. Christmas came, and for the first time in years, it was nice. No drama, no guilt, no manipulation. My brother and his fiancée hosted dinner, their first one together. The food was amazing, the laughter loud, and the love easy. I hadn't seen my brother that happy in years. His fiancée was sunshine, witty, kind, the sort of person who could make everyone feel seen. She asked if I'd help her pick her wedding dress. I laughed and said, "I'm as fashionable as a potato sack." She smiled and said, "That's why I trust you." It was a small thing, but it meant everything. When I got home that night, my house felt quiet again, but not empty. Just calm. Safe. That peace lasted about a week. My neighbor told me someone had left something on my porch again. I didn't even have to look to know who it was. It was my stepdad. He dropped off a plate of food and a jar of cranberry sauce with a note that said, "From your mother. She misses you. Happy Thanksgiving." For thence this project difference of the braided. I threw it away, not out of anger, out of survival, because I knew what it was: another trap, another way for her to sneak back into my life. And I wasn't letting her. Not again. In therapy, we talked about it. My therapist helped me reframe the urge to feel guilty as something conditioned, something I learned from years of being blamed for things that weren't mine to carry. "Guilt can feel like love when you've been trained that way," she said. "But real love doesn't hurt like this." I let that sit for a while. It made sense. It also hurt. But every week, it got a little easier to accept that my mother's version of love wasn't love at all. It was control dressed up as care. I also started noticing something new. My world was filling up again, not with drama, not with pain, but with people. My neighbors. My brother. My dad. Even my new therapist, who wasn't afraid to challenge me when I tried to hide behind humor or deflection. I realized I was surrounded by love, the real kind. The kind that gives you space to breathe, to fail, to heal. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave it context. It turned it into something I could live with. My brother's fiancée, I'm still getting used to calling her that, told me she planned to go back to school before the wedding. He looked at her like she hung the moon. When they talk, I can see what my sister used to say she wanted when she grew up. I want someone who makes me feel safe and brave. That's exactly what my brother found. I looked at the $2,000 I'd set aside months ago and thought, maybe I could use it to help them. With tuition. With wedding costs. Something good. Because maybe that's what healing looks like, turning pain into generosity. My sister would have wanted that. As for my mother, I don't know what she's doing now, and for the first time, I don't care. I've blocked her on everything. Changed my locks. Stopped checking for messages. The loss still aches sometimes, not just my sister, but the mother I'll never have. But I've learned that letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means refusing to let the pain dictate who you become. My therapist said something last week that I keep repeating to myself. Healing isn't the absence of hurt. It's learning to live a life big enough to hold it. I think I'm finally doing that. I still miss my sister. I still talk to her sometimes, in small ways, when I cook her favorite meal. When I walk past the park she loved. When I bake cookies for someone who needs a bit of sweetness. She's there. Not in ashes, not in dirt, but in every quiet act of kindness that keeps her spirit alive. And that's enough for me. Grief doesn't really end, it just changes shape. It stops being a storm and becomes a kind of weather you live with. Some days it's calm, others it creeps in quietly and settles in your bones. That's what my life had turned into, a rhythm of small, ordinary moments, where the ache was still there. But it no longer controlled everything. I started noticing the little things again. The smell of rain. The hum of traffic outside my window. The sound of my neighbor's kids laughing as they played tag on the sidewalk. For so long, I'd lived in survival mode, just trying to make it through each day without falling apart. Now I was starting to live again. Even if it still hurt sometimes. My dad was doing better too. He'd joined a local community center that organized events for older folks, board game nights, group dinners, small day trips. He'd call me afterward, telling me how he'd met a new friend or tried painting for the first time. I could hear something in his voice that had been missing for years. Peace. My brother was thriving. He and his fiancée were knee-deep in wedding plans, laughing through the chaos of it all. He'd send me pictures of venues, dresses, cakes. His fiancée had this way of lighting him up. It was the kind of joy you don't fake. Seeing them happy didn't make me jealous. It made me hopeful. It reminded me that life could be rebuilt from rubble, that love, the right kind, can exist without manipulation or pain. Then came the unexpected. My mother showed up. Again. It was mid-September. I remember because I'd been cleaning the house, windows open, sunlight spilling through the blinds. I heard a knock and froze. Some instinct just told me it wasn't anyone good. When I opened the door, there she was. She looked different this time, older, smaller somehow. But her voice was the same, soft and deliberate. "Can I come in?" she asked, and against every instinct I had, I let her. We sat in the living room, across from each other. The silence was thick. Then she started talking. The first thing she said was, "I was wrong." And I almost laughed because I'd waited years to hear those words. But coming from her mouth, they didn't feel real. She apologized for the ashes. Said she didn't mean to hurt me. But like always, it didn't stay an apology for long. She started crying, guilt-tripping, telling me how she'd been trying to fix things but that I was too stubborn, too unforgiving. She said, "You don't know what it's like to lose a child." I said, "No. But I know what it's like to lose a mother." That shut her up for a second, but then she changed tactics. She talked about family, about forgiveness, about how life is too short for grudges. She said she missed me, missed my brother, missed us being together. For a second I almost softened. But then I remembered. She'd said all of this before, and every time, it ended the same way, me feeling guilty, her feeling powerful. So this time, I didn't play the part. I didn't give her the forgiveness she was fishing for. When she left, she tried to hug me again, and I let her. But it didn't feel like love. It felt like manipulation disguised as comfort. After she was gone, I just sat there, trembling. My therapist called it emotional whiplash. It was the perfect description. Of course, she didn't stop there. A few days later, she started calling again, different numbers, blocked IDs. She even came to my work once, but I didn't see her. A coworker told me someone had been in the lobby asking for me. Then came the guilt messages again. "You'll regret this one day. Your sister would hate what you're doing. You've destroyed this family." Every word was a hook, baited with shame. But this time, I didn't bite. My therapist said to expect this. She said my mother was used to controlling me through guilt. And when that stopped working, she'd escalate. She was right. The next time my mother came to my door, it turned into another fight. A horrible, ugly, screaming match that spilled into the front yard. She accused me of being heartless. I accused her of being a monster. Years of resentment poured out. Every missed birthday. Every cruel comment. Every manipulation. At one point, she slammed the door on my hand and screamed that she'd pour the ashes down the drain. I saw red. I don't even remember what I said after that, only that I was shaking, dizzy, my chest burning. My neighbor came out, shouting my name, and that's the last thing I remember before everything went black. The doctors called it stress-induced cardiomyopathy, broken heart syndrome. My heart had literally stopped coping. It wasn't fatal, but it was a wake-up call. I'd been holding on to all that rage and pain for so long that my body just gave out. Recovery was slow. Medication, rest, therapy, time off work, but something changed in me after that. I realized that if I didn't stop letting her take up space in my head, she'd end up taking my life too. So I started setting real boundaries. Not just blocking her number, emotional boundaries. No more wondering what she was doing. No more stalking her social media. No more trying to decode her motives. I stopped making room for her in my story. My brother and his fiancée became my anchor. They'd come over, bringing dinner, sitting on the couch while we watched bad reality shows. Sometimes we didn't even talk about anything heavy, just laughed about nothing. My dad called less often, but when he did, it was just to chat. No check-ins, no pity. Just conversation. It felt normal again, and that was what I needed, normal. Even my neighbor helped without making it awkward. She'd drop off herbal tea, or a jar opener, or something small, but never hovered. Never pitied me. That's when I realized something important. Healing doesn't come from the people who broke you. It comes from the quiet kindness of those who didn't have to help you, but did anyway. One day, while baking, I decided to bring brownies to the family across the street again. When I got there, the kids came running. The older one told me about a drawing he made at school. The younger one climbed onto the porch railing, pretending to be a superhero. Their dad smiled, the tired kind of smile that still holds gratitude. He said, "You're kind of part of our family now, you know that?" It caught me off guard. I almost cried. For years, I'd felt like I didn't belong anywhere. And in that small, messy kitchen, surrounded by crayons and laughter, I realized I did. Not because of blood, but because of love, the real kind. Halloween came again. I went all out, this time lights, fake fog, music. The kids helped decorate. When trick-or-treating started, I recognized half the faces. Parents waved. Kids yelled my name. For the first time, I didn't feel like the ghost in my own neighborhood. When the night ended and the last of the candy was gone, I sat on my porch, surrounded by laughter echoing from down the street, and I whispered, "She would have loved this." And certainly, of course, like an all thing happened just to the because my sister would have. She would have been out there, smiling, handing out candy, making sure everyone got extra. And in that moment, I realized something beautiful. She wasn't gone. Not really. She lived in the kindness I gave, in the laughter around me, in the way I refused to become bitter. When I took down the decorations a few days later, I started planning something new. Maybe I'd volunteer at the local theater for the holidays. Maybe I'd help organize a community dinner. I wanted to keep building something better, something she would have been proud of. And maybe, in a way, that's how I finally let her go. Not by forgetting, but by living the way she did, open-hearted, giving, unafraid to love even after loss. The holidays were always my sister's season. She'd start humming Christmas songs in October, long before anyone else wanted to hear them. She loved the lights, the colors, the way the world seemed softer, even if just for a little while. After everything that happened, I thought I'd never be able to face Christmas again. But this time felt different. I wasn't trying to pretend things were okay. I was trying to build new meaning, one that didn't depend on anyone else's version of love or family. So I started early. I made lists, bought ingredients, hung up fairy lights on the porch. I even got a real tree for the first time in years. Messy, uneven, a little too big for my living room, but perfect in its imperfection. Dad came over to help me set it up. My brother dropped by later with his fiancée, and we decorated it together. No tears, no awkward silence. Just laughter, music, and the smell of pine. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for being happy. On Christmas Eve, I cooked dinner for my neighbors, the family across the street. They brought dessert. The kids insisted on showing me every toy they'd gotten early from relatives. The youngest one said, "You're like our Christmas auntie now. Like directo when he haven't bad." It made me laugh so hard I nearly cried. We spent hours eating, talking, playing board games. I remember thinking, this is what family is supposed to feel like. Warm, easy, real. That night, after everyone left, I sat by the window, looking at the snow falling under the streetlight. And for the first time since my sister's death, I whispered, "Merry Christmas." And meant it. The next morning, I got a message from my neighbor next door, the one who'd called 911 for me months ago. She asked if I wanted to go Christmas tree shopping with her the day after. I said yes. We spent the next day at a local farm, sipping hot cocoa, laughing about which trees looked like villains or heroes. It was simple, pure, almost childlike. And I realized I was slowly becoming the kind of person my sister would have adored. But not everything was peaceful. My stepdad showed up again, this time on Thanksgiving Day. When I wasn't home, my next-door neighbor said he dropped off a plate of food and a jar of cranberry sauce, along with a note. From your mother. She misses you. I threw it out without reading any further. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just didn't care. Because I finally understood something. Forgiveness isn't for people who keep breaking you. It's for people who are sorry and try to make it right, and she wasn't one of them. In therapy, we talked about it. I told my therapist how guilty I still felt, that quiet, lingering voice that kept asking, what if I'm being too harsh? She said something that stuck with me. Guilt can disguise itself as love. Especially when you've been raised to equate obedience with affection. It made sense. Every part of me had been trained to keep the peace, to make her happy, to earn her approval. And every time I refused, it felt like rebellion. But it wasn't rebellion, it was survival. And slowly, that realization started changing everything. I stopped checking her Facebook, stopped wondering what she was doing, stopped rehearsing what I'd say if she showed up again. Because she didn't matter anymore. Not to my healing. Not to my future. Dad was still doing great at the community center. He even started teaching a beginner's cooking class there. He'd send me photos of his students, holding up burnt lasagnas and collapsed soufflé, laughing like teenagers. He said it made him feel useful again. My brother and his fiancée were in full wedding mode, guest lists, fittings, plans. I'd never seen him so sure of something. He told me once, she makes me feel like mom never existed. It wasn't cruel. It was honest. And I understood that feeling, because I was learning to live in a world where my mother existed only as a memory and not a good one. I started doing small things to keep myself grounded. Volunteering at the community theater, helping with local charity drives, baking for fundraisers. It wasn't about filling the void anymore. It was about giving purpose to the space she left behind. Every time I gave something a meal, a smile, a kind word, I imagined my sister there beside me, cheering me on. It felt like stitching light into the dark places. Christmas came and went quietly. No phone calls from my mother. No surprise visits. Just peace. My brother's fiancée gave me a small gift, a silver bracelet engraved with the words, "You are enough." It broke me, in the best possible way. She told me, "You remind me that kindness doesn't have to come from the people we expect it from." I hugged her and told her I was honored to have her in our family. And I meant it. After New Year's, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, going through old photos. Not to punish myself this time, but to remember. There was one picture of my sister, her sitting cross-legged on the floor, holding a slice of cake bigger than her head, laughing like the world couldn't touch her. And for the first time, that photo didn't make me cry. It made me smile. Because maybe that's what healing really is, when the memory stops bleeding and starts blooming instead. The year was ending, and for once, I wasn't counting the days since she died. I was counting the days I'd survived, the days I'd chosen, peace, forgiveness, even without forgetting, and life. The world still hurt sometimes, but I wasn't drowning in it anymore. I was learning how to swim, and every time I baked, or laughed, or helped someone who needed it, I could almost hear her voice, small and soft, saying, "I'm proud of you." And I think, finally, I am too. Grief teaches you strange things about time. It bends it, stretches it, folds it in half. You blink, and it's been a year. But some memories still feel like they happened yesterday. Others fade like mist. Even the ones you swore you'd never forget. It had been over a year since everything blew up with my mother. Since that night with the ashes, the yelling, the broken trust. And for the first time, I could look back and not flinch. I could remember it without reliving it. It didn't mean I forgave her. It just meant I didn't need her to explain herself anymore. Because explanations don't heal. Actions do. And hers had always been words, empty, rehearsed, self-serving. My dad kept thriving in his new routine. He'd found a friend group at the community center, people who went on morning walks and swapped recipes. I went to visit him one weekend, and he showed me his latest hobby, pottery. He laughed as he held up this wobbly-looking mug and said, "Not everything that's cracked is broken." I smiled, because he didn't know how profound that sounded. But it was true. Not everything that's cracked is broken. My brother and his fiancée were just as happy as ever. He'd proposed officially now, on a small hiking trail where they used to go when they were broke college kids. She cried, of course. He said he barely got the ring on her finger before she tackled him with a hug. When he called to tell me, his voice cracked with joy. I hadn't heard him that happy since before my sister died. And honestly, I couldn't stop smiling. It's weird how other people's happiness can start to heal your pain too. I kept baking, of course. By now, it wasn't just a habit, it was therapy. There was something about measuring, stirring, watching the dough rise, all those small, patient movements that taught you good things take time. The family across the street had become like my own. The dad was finally getting help, a part-time nurse to care for his wife so he could take breaks. The kids were growing fast, always full of stories. The older one, who'd once been shy and serious, now told me exactly how I should decorate my house for each holiday. The younger one had a habit of running into my arms every time he saw me. They made me feel needed again, not because I was broken, but because I was part of something bigger than my pain. One Sunday, I took a walk around the neighborhood, something I hadn't done in years without a reason. The air was crisp, full of that faint wood smoke smell that always reminds me of autumn. I passed by houses glowing with light, laughter spilling from open windows, and for the first time, I realized I belonged here. I wasn't just the person with the sad story anymore. I was a neighbor, a friend, someone who showed up. That realization felt freeing. Around that time, my therapist and I started talking about what moving on really meant. I told her I felt guilty for living a normal life again, for laughing, for enjoying my job, for having good days when my sister would never get another. She looked at me and said, "You're not leaving her behind, you're taking her forward." That sentence broke me, because it was true. I'd been treating my healing like betrayal, as if getting better meant abandoning her. But really, it was the opposite. Living kindly, openly, that was keeping her with me. Every act of care, every bit of joy I let myself feel, it was a tribute to her. Then came something I didn't expect. A letter, not from my mother, from the funeral home. It had taken months of back and forth emails, but they'd finally found what I'd been waiting for. My sister's fingerprints. They apologized for the delay, but I didn't care. I sat there holding that small, inked card, shaking. It wasn't just a print. It was her touch. A physical trace of her that still existed in this world. I cried until I couldn't anymore. That night, I lit a candle and laid the card beside it. I whispered, "You're still here," and I meant it. Dad found something too, an old clay footprint from when she was a baby. One of those keepsake things parents make but forget about. It was cracked, dusty, but still perfect in its own way. We decided to get matching tattoos, mine with her fingerprint, his with her footprint. It felt like closing a circle that had been open too long. It wasn't about holding on to her ashes anymore. It was about carrying her truth, something no one could take away or lie about again. When I showed my therapist the tattoo design, she smiled and said, "It's a symbol of reclaiming." She was right. It wasn't just for my sister. It was for me, reclaiming the narrative, the memories, the love that my mother had poisoned. Because now, even the parts of the story that hurt didn't belong to her anymore. They belonged to me. My mother had stopped trying to contact me, at least for now. Her silence didn't feel threatening anymore. It felt irrelevant. I still thought about her sometimes, but not in the way I used to. I didn't wonder if she was sorry, or what she'd say if she saw me now. Instead, I wondered what it must be like to live inside her kind of loneliness, to have driven everyone away, and still not understand why. That thought used to make me angry. Now, it just made me sad. But sadness wasn't the same as weakness anymore. It was empathy without attachment. As the months passed, life started to find its rhythm again. Work was steady. My friendships deepened. And I even started planning a trip with Dad and my brother, something we hadn't done since we were kids. We decided to visit the campground my sister loved one last time. Not as a memorial, but as a celebration. We brought her favorite snacks, played her favorite songs, told the same old stories, until the sun went down. And somewhere between the laughter and the tears, I realized, this was what peace felt like. Not forgetting, not pretending, just living fully enough that her memory could exist without hurting anymore. As the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, Dad said quietly, "She'd be so proud of you." I looked at him, tears in my eyes, and whispered back, "I hope so. Because I'm finally proud of me too." It's strange how healing doesn't come with a single moment of clarity. There's no cinematic breakthrough, no dramatic scene where everything suddenly makes sense. Instead, it sneaks up on you, quiet, gentle, almost unnoticeable. One day, you just realize you've stopped checking the door every time a car slows outside. Stopped holding your breath whenever your phone rings. That's how I knew I was getting better. My mother's absence used to echo through everything. Every celebration, every quiet evening. Now, it was just silence, not empty, not haunting. Just gone. And in that space, other things had grown. I started noticing how full my life had become. I had friends now, real ones, not people I spoke to out of habit or convenience. My neighbors had become family. My brother and his fiancée were planning their future. My dad was finding joy in small things again. And even I had begun to laugh without feeling guilty for it. For the first time, my story wasn't defined by what I'd lost. It was about what I'd built after. My therapist once asked me what I'd say to my younger self, the version of me that first learned the truth about the ashes. I thought about it for a long time before answering. I'd tell them it's okay to stop waiting for the apology that will never come, because that's what I had done for years. Waited. For my mother to change. For closure to arrive. For justice. For peace. But closure isn't something people give you. It's something you claim when you finally decide the story can end on your terms. Dad was still thriving at the community center. He'd even started dating someone, nothing serious yet, but enough to make him blush when I asked. Her name was Elise. She was kind, funny, and had this calming energy that reminded me of the version of my dad before everything fell apart. When he told me, I smiled and said, "You deserve this." He said, "So do you." It hit me harder than I expected. My brother's wedding planning was in full swing by then. He and his fiancée had found a small venue with an open garden and a big oak tree in the middle. They wanted the ceremony to be simple, filled with people who loved them, not just people who looked good in pictures. He asked me to be the one to give a small speech at the reception. Nothing fancy. Just something honest. That night, I sat with a blank notebook for hours, trying to figure out what honest meant. And the words came slowly, in pieces, like light through cracks. Sometimes, family isn't the people you're born to. It's the people who choose you, who stay when things fall apart, who hold your hand in the dark. And love, real love, doesn't demand silence, or guilt, or perfection. It just asks you to show up. When I read those lines out loud, I thought about my sister. About how much she'd have loved this version of us, broken, scarred, but still together. A few weeks later, I got an invitation to a community volunteering event, a local group helping organize meals for families going through hard times. Without thinking twice, I signed up. It was small at first. A few hours here and there. But the more I helped, the more it felt like something clicked inside me. I'd spent years focusing on my own pain, and maybe that was necessary. But now, giving back, helping others carry their pain, even for a little while, that was what I needed. One evening, I was serving food to a young mom and her daughter. The little girl couldn't have been older than 8, and when I handed her a plate, she smiled and said, "Thank you, mister." Something about the way she said it, shy, grateful, hopeful, reminded me of my sister. After they left, I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty chairs, thinking, maybe this is how she'd want me to keep her alive. Not through ashes, not through grief, but through kindness, through service, through love that reaches beyond blood. The days turned into weeks, and my life kept filling with small, ordinary joys. I'd walk through the neighborhood and realize people waved at me not because they pitied me, but because I was part of this place now. The woman at the coffee shop knew my order. The kids across the street called me chef. My neighbor dropped off her homemade soup and said, "This time, I'm returning the favor." These tiny things stitched themselves into a kind of quiet happiness. Then one evening, as I was locking up for the night, I found a letter wedged under my door. No return address. Just my name. Written in a shaky hand. I knew instantly. It was from her, my mother. For a long moment, I just stared at it. My heart thudded painfully. The old fear rising, the urge to tear it open. To finally hear what she had to say. But then I remembered everything she'd done. Every false apology. Every manipulation. Every time she'd twisted love into a weapon. And so, I didn't open it. I lit a candle, held the envelope for a second, and dropped it straight into the flame. It burned quickly, the paper curling into black ash. And for the first time, I didn't cry. Because I finally understood. I didn't need her words anymore. I already knew how the story ended. The next morning, I woke up lighter. I walked outside. The air cool and sharp with the promise of winter. The sky was pale pink, the kind my sister always called cotton candy mornings. I smiled, whispered, "Good morning, kiddo," and went inside to make breakfast. Something had shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. For years, I'd been living in reaction to pain, to betrayal, to loss. Now, I was living in creation. I was creating peace, love, and something I hadn't felt in a long time, home. My therapist once said, healing doesn't mean you stop missing them. It means you stop needing them to make sense of who you are. The nar masked, and the rateable go intense. And standing there, whisk in hand, flower on my shirt. Laughter from across the street echoing through the window. I knew she was right. I still missed my sister. I still thought about her every day. But I didn't need my mother anymore to define that grief. Because the truth is, I'd turned that pain into purpose. And maybe that's the closest thing to peace any of us ever get. Spring came early that year. The kind of soft, golden mornings that smell like rain and blooming earth. The world was waking up again, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was waking up with it. I'd stopped counting anniversaries by then. My sister's birthday, the day she passed. The day I found out about the ashes, all those dates used to hang over me like ghosts. But this year, they felt lighter. They were still there, but they didn't define the whole calendar anymore. That, I realized, was healing. Not the absence of pain, but its evolution into memory. Work had become steady again. I'd learned to balance my time instead of hiding in it. I wasn't working to escape anymore. I was working to live. My coworkers noticed. One of them, a quiet woman named Grace, told me during lunch, "You seem softer lately. Like something finally unclenched." I smiled. "Yeah," I said. "Something did. Aiding service ben reasti. They working teljactive." She didn't ask for details, and I didn't offer any. It was enough that she saw it, that I'd stopped moving like someone who was waiting for the next collapse. My brother's wedding was approaching fast. Every weekend was filled with planning, fittings, rehearsals, decorations. Their excitement was infectious. I hadn't seen my brother laugh this much since before our world fell apart. He asked if I'd walk Mom's side of the aisle. I froze for a second. He caught it and quickly added, "You don't have to. I just don't want it to feel empty." I nodded slowly. "I'll do it," I said, not for her but for him, for us. Because maybe the act of walking down that aisle wasn't about her absence. Maybe it was about reclaiming space she'd poisoned and making it sacred again. The day of the wedding was clear and warm, sunlight filtering through the oak trees. The air full of laughter and the smell of fresh flowers. It was the kind of day that made you believe in second chances. The ceremony was simple, beautiful, raw, no pretense. Just love, pure and present. When it was my turn to walk, I held my head high. My brother smiled at me from the altar, proud, tearful, strong. And in that moment, I didn't think about who wasn't there. I thought about who was. Dad, standing with his arm around Elise. My neighbors sitting a few rows back, smiling. The family across the street, waving when they saw me. And I swear, for a moment, I could almost feel my sister there, sunlight against my shoulder, laughter in the wind. The reception was loud, joyful chaos. Dancing, bad jokes, and toasts that went on too long. When it was my turn to speak, I took the mic with trembling hands. I said, "For a long time, I thought love was something you had to earn, something you had to fight for, beg for. But standing here today, I realize love isn't supposed to hurt, it's supposed to heal. It's supposed to make you feel seen. And if my sister were here, she'd probably tell you both to keep choosing kindness, even on the hard days." The room went quiet. My brother's fiancée wiped her eyes. My dad nodded, smiling through tears. It was one of those moments that didn't need applause, just silence, the kind that means everyone felt it. Afterward, my brother hugged me tight and whispered, "She would have loved this." I whispered back, "She does." When I got home that night, I kicked off my shoes, still half dizzy from the laughter and champagne. The house was quiet, peaceful. On the counter, I noticed a small envelope, white, plain, with no handwriting on it. For a second, my stomach dropped. My first thought was her. But when I opened it, I found a card from Dad and Elise, a photo from the wedding with a note that said, "This is the family you helped rebuild. We couldn't have done it without you." I sat down and cried, not the kind of crying that comes from pain, but from relief, from gratitude, because for so long, I'd believed I was the broken link in our family chain. Now I understood I'd been the one holding it together. A week later, I went back to the community center to help with a local food drive. It was busy, kids running around, volunteers stacking boxes, people laughing. I found myself working alongside a woman named Claire, who had the same kind of calm energy as my therapist. We talked while sorting canned goods. Nothing deep, just life, music, movies, favorite foods. But it felt easy, natural. She told me she'd lost her dad the year before, and how volunteering helped her feel close to him again. For the first time in a long time, I didn't flinch when someone talked about loss. I just nodded and said, "Yeah, I get that." And she smiled in this quiet, knowing way. We ended up closing the drive together, laughing as we cleaned up. And when she asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime, I said yes without hesitation. Not because I was looking for anything, but because I wasn't afraid to try anymore. The next few weeks were filled with small, golden moments. Morning walks with Dad. Weekend brunches with my brother and his new wife. Baking lessons with the kids across the street. Evenings were peaceful again. Music, tea, and the soft hum of the world outside. Sometimes, I'd still catch my breath thinking of my sister. But it wasn't sharp anymore. It was tender, the kind of ache you don't want to lose because it reminds you how deeply you loved. My therapist asked me once, "If your sister could see you now, what do you think she'd say?" "They do in a rastin instonator. For this dim place, one for their staff." I laughed softly and said, "She'd probably tell me to stop over baking the cookies." Then I paused and added, "But she'd also say she's proud. Because I finally stopped trying to fix what broke me. That night, I stood by the window, watching the streetlights flicker across the wet pavement. Somewhere down the street, someone was playing an old song on the guitar. The melody floated up through the air, soft and imperfect, and I realized something. Healing doesn't erase the past. It just teaches you how to carry it without letting it crush you. I whispered a quiet thank you not to my mother, not even to myself, but to the life that had somehow kept going when I thought it couldn't. The world outside shimmered ordinary, beautiful, alive. And for the first time in years, so was I. Sometimes, I still dream about her. Not the way she looked when she died, not the grief, not the hospital, not the ashes. I dream about her laughing, running through the backyard barefoot, hair flying, hands full of wildflowers. She turns around and looks at me with that mischievous grin that always meant she was about to say something funny. In the dream, I never hear what it is. She just smiles, and that's enough. When I wake up, it doesn't hurt anymore. It feels peaceful, like her memory finally learned to rest inside me instead of haunting me. It's been years now since everything with my mother. She's still out there somewhere, I guess. I haven't seen her, haven't heard from her. And I'm okay with that. Sometimes people ask if I ever think about reconciling. And I always say the same thing. You can forgive someone and still keep your distance. Because forgiveness isn't an invitation, it's a release. And I've already released her from my heart, from my home, from my story. She's part of my past, not my present. And I finally love my life too much to hand her the pen again. Dad married Elise last summer. It was a small ceremony at the community garden where they first met. She wore a simple blue dress, and he couldn't stop smiling. I cried the entire time, happy tears. The kind that come when you realize life really does give second chances to those who wait long enough to see them. He told me later. She makes the world quiet again. I think that's what love is supposed to do. Not fix you, just make the noise stop long enough so you can hear yourself think. My brother and his wife bought a house nearby. They visit almost every week. Sometimes, we all cook together, messy, chaotic, full of laughter. Other times, we just sit around and talk about nothing. There's this beautiful kind of peace in ordinary moments now. We don't talk about my mother anymore. Not out of avoidance, but because she doesn't belong in our present. We built a new kind of family. One defined by kindness, honesty, and the willingness to keep showing up for each other. That's what she could never understand. Love doesn't demand obedience. It asks for presence. As for me, I kept volunteering. The community center has become almost like a second home. I teach a weekly baking class for kids now, Chef Wednesdays, they call it. It's chaotic and loud, and every session ends with flour everywhere and someone crying over burnt cookies. But it's perfect. Sometimes I'll catch myself watching the kids laugh and think, she would have loved this. And I know she's there, not in some mystical sense, but in the way I've learned to love people the way she used to. My sister taught me that giving is a kind of immortality. And now, every small act of kindness feels like proof she never really left. One afternoon, after class, a little girl came up to me with her hands covered in frosting. She looked up at me and asked, "Did you always know how to make people happy with food?" I laughed and said, "No, sweetheart. I just learned how to share what made me happy first." And she grinned, toothless and wide-eyed, and said, "Then I'm gonna do that too." I swear, I felt something in my chest unclench right then. Like a thread I'd been holding finally loosened gently, lovingly. When I got home that evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, the sun dipping low, the air full of that honeyed quiet that only exists at the end of a good day. I thought about the journey, about how it all began with lies, ashes, and anger, and somehow turned into this quiet, ordinary grace. I thought about my mother too, not with hatred, not even with bitterness, but with understanding. She was broken in ways I can't fix, and I've finally accepted that her brokenness doesn't have to become mine. That's what true healing is, not forgetting, but refusing to inherit someone else's pain. Sometimes I still wear that necklace, the one with the fake ashes, not because it's real, but because it reminds me of the lie that became my freedom. It used to be a symbol of betrayal. Now it's a reminder that love can survive even after being burned to the ground, because I rebuilt it, piece by piece, truth by truth, and in that rebuilding, I found something more powerful than the grief that started it all: peace. A few nights ago, I went to the park where my sister and I used to feed ducks. It was quiet, the pond reflecting the streetlights, the air cool and still. I sat on the bench where we used to sit, closed my eyes, and whispered, "I'm okay now, not for her, not for my mother, for me. Because I finally am. And if anyone ever asks what happened, how I got through, how I survived, I'll tell them this: grief is not the end of love, it's just the proof that love existed. And if you're lucky enough to love deeply, you're strong enough to heal deeply too." That's what she taught me. That's what I carry now, not ashes, not anger, but her laughter. And every time the wind moves through the trees, I swear it sounds just like her, free, light, and eternal.